Well, I'm very honored to be able to introduce Martha Schroth. Martha has lived in Gibsons for 43 years, and she has also attended Calvary Baptist Church for 43 years. She said that they received such a warm welcome here on their first Sunday that they came, that they decided this was the place for them. And I must say, visitors will experience that same friendliness here. For the past 25 years, Martha has been the force behind an amazing program called Operation Christmas Child. And it's these boxes that you see around town and in the foyer. This is an amazing program that's part of an organization called Samaritan's Purse. Millions of gift-filled boxes have been delivered to boys and girls around the world. You might have noticed them when you came in. Martha is the one who coordinates this program in our area, and she has shipped thousands and thousands of boxes for over the last 25 years. She's our church secretary, and she's also an elder on our church board, so she's one very busy lady. Martha knows what it means to trust in God. There's a verse in the Bible that talks about God being a strong tower, and I know that Martha has found this to be true. So welcome, Martha.
It's good to see you all. Ooh, can you hear me? Good. I've entitled my talk, Thankful for Stepping Stones. Thank you for this opportunity to share some of my life with you. The scripture for my story is, "But the Lord stood with me and gave me strength," from 2 Timothy 4:17. I'd like to use the word picture of a river of life with twists and turns, but also with stepping stones that allow me to catch my breath, for which I'm very thankful. I see these stepping stones as significant events in my life. They were the times where I was very aware of the presence of God with me. The first stepping stone is my early family. I was born in Saskatchewan. I'm the oldest of 10 children, 5 girls and 5 boys. My parents moved to Manitoba when the government offered land to homesteading people for $1 an acre. They left all their family and all that they knew to start life in the middle of nowhere. They had 3 children when we moved, and I wasn't even 5 years old, but I learned to watch my siblings. My parents worked hard to build a log cabin as fast as possible, filling the cracks with a mixture of mud and grass and heating and cooking with a wood stove. The family grew, and so did the farm, where we raised most of what we ate. It was hard work to eke out a living on land that was filled with rocks and trees, both of which had to be cleared before we could grow anything on it. My family was broken in many ways. We heard criticism almost every day, and even though we worked hard from a young age, we were not ever told that we did a good job. We were not told we were loved. My parents raised us the way that they were raised, not sparing the rod and lots of hard work. We went to church on Sunday, but we didn't invite God into the rest of our week. When I was 12, a traveling evangelist came to our area, and when we went to hear him preach. There, I heard for the first time that God loves me and wants a relationship with me. When we got home that night, I prayed and invited Jesus to forgive my sins and to come and live in my heart and to help me to live for him. He promised never to leave me, ever alone, but that he would always walk with me. As I received the gift of faith to believe this, a peace filled my heart. I learned that he wanted me to tell him my heartaches, and he wanted to carry my pain if I would only give it to him. I remember after a really bad day, that night I promised God that if he ever gave me a family, I would find a way to show them love, and they would not ever live with physical or verbal abuse. Up until my encounter with Jesus, I had thought I was unloved, but the Lord stood with me and gave me strength. My second stepping stone was my marriage and family. My dad had gone to Winnipeg for some major surgery. While he was there, he shared a room with a man working for someone named Albert. When Albert came to visit the roommate, Dad invited him to come out to our farm, which was located 65 miles north of Winnipeg, to go hunting rabbits. Albert showed up one weekend, and he said he always knew that I was the woman for him. He was a man with a tender heart and a deep love for God and his family. He was a hardworking man who could fix almost anything, and he could build many things, including boats, furniture, homes, and other buildings. We got married in 1969 and began our life together. Soon we had 2 daughters, Doris and Linda. We purchased 160 acres of farmland about 20 miles outside of Winnipeg. We designed and built a new home. I had a big garden, and I raised free-range chickens, ducks, and geese, and sold them to our family and friends around the area. Albert continued to work in the city to pay for the equipment and all the needs of a farm where everything is expensive. The grain crops took a lot of work, money, and prayer for sun or rain as needed. Our faith was tested, but the Lord stood with me and gave me strength. My next stepping stone was our move to BC. In 1980, Manitoba was in a recession, and banks were repossessing farms in the area. People were loading their belongings into trucks and moving to BC and Alberta. There was less work for Albert, and we were concerned and praying about our future. He just wanted to be able to provide for his family, and that meant he had to find work. Every Sunday evening, we watched the Beachcomber Show, filmed in Gibsons. And he noticed the beauty and the ocean and the lush greenery everywhere. Pretty soon he was saying, "We should go and check that out." Well, I couldn't imagine what he was thinking, to even consider leaving everything we knew, including our families, to move to the end of the country where we didn't know anybody. I prayed fervently that this was not something God wanted us to do. But many things miraculously fell into place, and we found ourselves moving to Gibsons. Nothing but God could have made this happen. I knew that if my faith meant anything, I had to trust that God. We arrived here in August of 1980 with all our earthly possessions. It was a very hard time for me because Albert had work, the girls had school, but I didn't have a place where I fit in, and I knew nobody. But the Lord stood with me and gave me the strength to do the next thing. We went to Calvary Baptist Church, and we were welcomed, and we found a place to grow in our walk with God. Thank you to those of you who are here today, who made us feel welcome. One day I was getting groceries in Super Value, and I heard someone call my name. That was something that had not happened in this place for a very long time. My heart filled with joy, I turned around to find Darlene greeting me. It was to me that God heard me, and he answered in a way that showed me his love for me. My next stepping stone was Albert's injury. Albert was on the school board as a carpenter for all the schools on the coast when he slipped on ice and fell down a flight of cement stairs, rupturing several discs in his back. He was never able to return to work, and he was only 54. Along with regular bills, both our girls were in post-secondary school, and even though I was working full-time, it wasn't enough to pay for everything. He was convinced we would lose our home, and he sunk deep into depression because he was helpless to change anything. For a man who saw his worth in providing for his family, it was a devastating blow. When one person in a marriage struggles, it affects everybody. he was a carpenter and he did hard. We had to prove that wasn't true by going to countless medical specialist appointments, subjecting him to endless tests, including living at WorkSafe BC in Vancouver, where they did every test they could think of, providing all the paperwork they kept asking for. Finally, 8 very long years later, a judge hired by the union ordered WorkSafe BC back pay with interest. We were able to pay off our home and other debts, but the Lord stood with us, gave us strength to do what was required in my name is injury. 94. Albert and I were putting the first ever Christmas light. She went off to youth to Elfin to go tubing. All on the coast here. On one of the trips when they were tubing, she was on a big inner tube with her boyfriend, later her husband, lying back when it spun off the track and her head hit a tree. Her skull had been in an accident and was in the hospital. We got there as fast as we could, just to airlift her out. And I walked into that intensive care room and saw her lying very still, hooked up to many machines. I knew there was nothing I could do person to do all the right things. I was thankful she was alive because that meant there was hope. We learned more than we ever wanted to know about traumatic brain injury, about comas. So in the days ahead, we came and spoke to her whenever we were in the room. The doctors didn't give us much hope for a good outcome. But I knew God was there because I was filled with peace, and the Lord saved me and gave me strength every day. Daily, they changed her positions. One day, they sat her up in a recliner chair and tied her in so that she wouldn't fall over, including a soft cloth around her head to hold up her head. This was a few days before Christmas when I walked in and I greeted her as usual and began talking to her. I was facing her and I watched her eyes when she mouthed, "Hi, Mom." She hadn't spoken before, and they told us she likely wouldn't know us. So her eyes traveled around the room because her head was held still, and she had this questioning expression on her face. So I told her she had been in an accident and was in the hospital, but she was getting better. She recognized of learning all the basic sign of improvement, and my journal is filled with countless miracles during those weeks. She worked very hard to get stronger, and eventually she moved to GF Strong Rehab Center. She got engaged while they were in rehab. She planned her wedding from there. She came home in April, was married in July, and was back to teaching by September. Nobody could believe it. She and her husband enjoyed life. 4 years later, it was a windy, stormy, pouring rain night in November when Doris went to worship practice in Sechelt. She was on her way home in her little car when a cement truck and hydroplaned as the truck finally came to us across the highway, and she had nowhere to go but under it. Just behind the cement truck, there was a doctor on his way to the ER. Right there on the accident scene, to do all the right things because it took 45 minutes for the first responders to cut her out of her car. Meanwhile, I was teaching a workshop, making workshop in my home, and I had with ladies. When the doorbell and head upstairs, Albert was on the couch and he didn't answer the doorbell, and it kept ringing. And I wondered why nobody was answering or why the ladies didn't just come in. So finally I ran downstairs and opened the door to see a policeman on my doorstep. And I knew something had happened to one of my girls. I could hardly believe my ears as he told me Doris had been in an accident and that we needed to get to the hospital as fast as possible. Albert and I grabbed our coats. I got my purse. I told the ladies what I knew, and I asked them to pray for us. As we were leaving our driveway, the policeman stopped us again, and he said Doris had been airlifted out. They had called the ferries to hold the last ferry for us, and we got a police escort to the ferry. Albert had no meds with him and said he couldn't possibly go to Vancouver. So I dropped him at the terminal, and one of the ladies from my house, came to get him. The police had been unable to locate Albert's husband, Doris's husband, because he was at a friend's house. The chief steward on the ferry found out they took Doris to VGH since St. Paul's had no beds. I picked up Linda and we went to the hospital where they were We were shown to a small room. And we were shocked to recognize him. It was a doctor from St. Paul's Hospital. He told us that he was on call for VGH. And when he had seen Doris, he recognized her. After checking her head and seeing where he did surgery for, he confirmed that it was her. Because he knew her history, had a prior brain injury, he was able to do all of the right things. Only God could have arranged this, to have this doctor. Records were somewhere else. Once again, the Lord stood with me and gave me strength to face whatever that day contained. I was flooded with peace, knowing that God was with all of us. God gave our family strength to walk with her and encourage her to fight her way back again. This time, the journey was much harder, much longer, and it still continues to this day. Me with whatever I have today, because I was advocating for Albert and for Doris to get the help they needed. Now Linda stepped up and spent many hours with Doris. One day, after a visit with Doris, Linda handed me an envelope and asked me not to open it until I got home. In it, she wrote that she was broken too. She told me she felt she had lost her mom, her dad, and her sister. She wrote that she desperately needed us, especially me, and I was consumed with the crisis Doris was in. My courageous daughter reached out for help by being honest with me. We talked and we wept. I asked her forgiveness for neglecting her and not sharing my grief. I'm so thankful that we learned to talk about the hard stuff as God poured his healing into our broken hearts. That special relationship continues to this day, as she is my encourager, my advisor, my computer expert, and my good friend. Then there are stepping stones of grief and change. Albert's health continued to get worse, and even though the doctors wanted him in palliative care, Albert chose to be at home so he could have peace and quiet. He left his broken body one night as he went to meet Jesus, where there is no more pain and suffering. I miss him, We shared my life. 7 years later, I'm still trying to figure out how to move forward in many areas. The girls and I were there for each other, and Linda had her best friend Rob to support her as she grieved the loss of her dad. Linda and Rob got married the following June, and we all missed Albert. So on a very special day, joy and sorrow mingled as they began. Moved to Quesnel right after change for me, because she had been close to me, physically as well as emotionally. Today, my stepping stones continue. For over 25 years, I've enjoyed filling shoe boxes for children because this small gift of school supplies, hygiene items, and toys changes their lives. When they receive this gift, they know that they are loved and someone cares about them. I coordinate the post. I know that the little things I do here are lives around the world, and my heart fills with joy. I'm thankful for each stepping stone God has allowed into my life because I've grown in my faith and trust in God for my future. When we walk through pain, we know that God is with us, and it will produce in us a character that He desires to have. When I didn't know the direction He will take me, I'm confident that He will be with me every step of the way. This is my story. These are my stepping stones. Each of you have your own story and your own stones. If you are ready, I encourage you to invite God into all areas of life, easy or perfect, but you will never be alone. It is follow Him. We do this by inviting Him to join us on each of the stepping stones in the river of our life. Thank you so much.